Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you may be. We're rolling into our 20th hour here of ID 24 2017. For those that are just joining us, welcome aboard. Use the ID 24 hashtag in Twitter if you have questions you'd like to ask our next presenters. And if you need live captioning, you can find the link in the YouTube events comments under this window. So we're really excited for our next presentation. It's from Jen Krul and Janna Cameron, both located in Waterloo, Ontario, which is in Canada. It's our own personal tech hub here. And they are UX researchers. And we're thrilled to have them on. And their talk is going to be them sharing insights, lessons learned, and personal stories from their experience conducting UX research with people with cognitive impairments and people who are blind and low vision. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Janna.
All right, thank you. So hi, this is Janna speaking, and it's just great to be chatting with everybody today about user research with people with disabilities. I've been working in UX and of accessibility for about a decade now, and funny enough, I kind of fell into this, and I'm really happy I did. I started my career as a UX researcher, so doing lots of sort of standard usability testing on phones. And I mean, I'd watch someone use a product, see what works, what doesn't. And what was awesome about it was I could see it actually led into product improvements. Now, later in my career, I was asked to look at accessibility. And frankly, I was a little intimidated because all I knew about was the Bobby checker, if anyone remembers that. Now, I dipped my toes into accessibility by doing what came naturally to me. I did some usability testing. Didn't really realize that this really wasn't the typical approach to go about running an accessibility program. But it had a really wonderful impact because becoming a huge checklist of technical checks, it was really based on empathy. And over time, I stretched sort of my user research repertoire, in user research for inclusive design to include other types of research.
Yeah, and I'm Jen, and I'm also really delighted to be talking with you today. I'm a UX researcher and a product designer at a small company called Ametros. And at Ametros, we have a really specific goal. And that goal is to create software that helps people with early to mid-stage dementia live just a little bit more independently for a little bit longer. And so as I'm talking, you might be thinking to yourself, do people with dementia actually even use technology? And you're not alone. This is a question that I get all the time.
Oh, looks like we've lost our presenters. Now, what do we do, Johnny? I guess we have to wait for them to come back. Let's see if we can.
You got any material you've been working on recently?
Yeah, any improv, any suggestions from the audience? Let's see if we can get them back. I mean, you and I are still here, so it must be some connectivity issue on their end.
So for those who've been here for the past,
a little bit about the place you were from, Johnny, that Canadian place that was it a tech hub or technological hub of the world or something?
Waterloo, Ontario, yeah. No, I was hoping that most of the people watching are have been here for the full 20 hours, so they're as loopy as the rest of us. So yeah.
All right, folks, just give us a moment to get them back. So far, we haven't heard from them yet.
Good thing this isn't Berkir's Area 51 talk, or ARIA 51 talk, because that'd be really weird if the presenters disappeared, But, yeah.
All right, folks, just give us a moment to get them back. So far, we haven't heard from them yet. Good thing this isn't Berkir's Area 51 talk, or ARIA 51 talk, because that'd be really weird if the presenters disappeared, Good thing this isn't Berkir's Area 51 talk, or ARIA 51 talk, because that'd be really weird if the presenters disappeared, Maybe it has something to do with all these times Lainey mentioned the current administration.
Yeah.
Shut it down, fake news.
Alternative facts. Yeah. It's water. So.
That was all the material I had.
Yeah, let me just now.
It's a good way to start out your hosting gig, Johnny.
Yeah, well,
that's what we do to all the new hosters, you know. We put a little thing.
All right, so I'm getting requests to play music. I'm getting requests to let my hair down. The sun is still up, so I'm just gonna keep the hair up, okay? We may be graced with Leonie Watson's presence.
Yeah.
She might come and rescue us. Leonie to the rescue.
Save us from our awkward dead air while we're trying to get them back.
And here she is, Leonie Watson.
Hello.
Can you do some stand-up improv material?
Can I? What would no?
You're an entertainer, right?
Hans, and you Hans, we could pick up our arguments from CSUN.
Yeah. Yeah, those of you who were at CSUN at our presentation that we had there, dev versus user, we had a little debate about you know, whether area controls was sufficiently supported right now or not. And yesterday, who was it who had it in his presentation? And he basically went back to the same
Eric.
topic. Eric, yeah.
Eric Eggett was talking about it, yeah.
Yeah, we were saying, oh, look, it's going to be round 2, Lainey. Gonna have another hot debate.
It's got to be done.
Yeah.
I can't let you get away with winning. That can't be done.
Yeah. I guess we'll have to just swap it another time for next year, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think we might have to.
I can do a little wrestling promos. You go down, Watson.
It does make me think actually of a question that I think I may have actually asked Eric in his talk earlier. Is at the moment ARIA is only tested for support by the platform accessibility APIs. So the APIs that assistive technologies use to find out information from the browser. I wonder if it would be more practical if ARIA was actually tested with assistive technologies. Screen readers, most obviously, because they're the ones that utilize ARIA most. Because it seems to me, and ARIA controls is a good example, sometimes it's maybe not enough just to say that the API supports something when actually the real world implementation in terms of how the user gets at the stuff maybe doesn't match that level of support.
Right.
Do you think that'd be a good step for them to take, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just overall a difficult thing to get right because nobody really knows what the right way is. So
yeah, that's true.
Even if we were to tell companies what to do, and you know, or if we could tell them what to do, we wouldn't really know what to tell them because we don't know what the expectation is.
But I mean, even if you know, if we at the moment, you know, ARIA controls is in the ARIA specification because it's supported by multiple accessibility APIs, but it's only supported by one screen reader. Right,
that's the thing. I mean, the API does a lot of things. It exposes a lot of things, but if it's not translated to the user in a helpful way, then what's the point?
Right, yeah, that's the bit I'm kind of curious about. But then, of course, it would open up just huge amounts of extra testing, which would be a headache, of course.
So while we're waiting, there was a question from Henny directed at me. I'm Hans Hillen from the Porcello Group, by the way. How I got into accessibility. And the answer is, in 2006, I was doing a little thesis for my master's, and it happened to be about internet navigation by blind web users.
Okay.
And I was working on a little prototype as a Firefox extension, and I drew the attention from Aaron Leventhal, who most of you will know as an accessibility legend. He's now working for Google. And he invited me to come to CSUN. And
excellent.
One thing led to another. I met my our boss, or former boss, I guess at this point, Mike Pacello, there, and I landed this TPG job, and I've never looked back. And I've been going to CSUN every year since, and I love going there. And I think after all these years, accessibility is still a great place to work in. I think we can all agree.
Yeah, I remember the first time I went, it was a great vibe at CSUN. I came away just, absolutely thrilled. But it's a good question, Johnny. You're reasonably new to TPG and I think accessibility in some respects, Johnny, you come from a development background. How do you find kind of, the conferences that are out there in terms of the way they deal with accessibility, or the course materials, or, tutorials, that kind of thing?
I think they're great. And I think a prime example of that is A11YTO, which is turning more towards a curriculum sort of format as opposed to just, just regurgitating the same sort of talks over and over. So I think that's a great example of our meetup here in Toronto. And then, of course, things like this, ID24, where you have people from all around the world with, such diverse backgrounds and experiences. And so it's it's thrilling. And I think we have Jennifer back. Do we have audio on Jennifer, Krul?
Guessing not for the moment.
No.
Yeah.
Oh,
there she is. Hi, Jennifer. Can you hear us?
Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Hi.
Ah, hello.
What happened?
Oh, hi. We didn't know that we left.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
We've been sweating here trying to fill up the we're glad you're back.
We know we lost you.
Okay, well, we're here. Let's do it.
For a while now,
you guys
which slides you need to go back to, but if you want to share your screen again, then we can continue.
All right.
You starting from the beginning?
You don't know how happy we are to see you guys.
I had no idea.
They started asking
we heard you guys
the
talking.
first slide, but a little while after that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, once more
a
from
little
the
while
top.
after the first slide.
Yeah, there's a few slides.
Oh my gosh. All right.
Scene.
All right. Okay.
Don't forget to share the screen.
All right. Okay. Can you see it? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. From the top. All right. Do you need to do the intros again?
No, that's fine. No, I think it was just 3 or 4 slides in.
Okay. All right. We will start by talking about recruiting people.
All right. Okay. So before you can ask people about your product idea, you actually have to find them. And so as a user researcher, I'm used to just phoning a recruiter and they'll find the right people and ad in Kijiji or Craigslist. Now, when you're used to this, you're going to have to really reconsider your approach and adjust your expectations for sort of the buffer time needed to find the right people. I mean, this is definitely not a get people next week type of endeavor. And your target testers are a super specialized group, and like most specialized groups, you're going to have to go to some lengths to find them. Yeah. So a first and very long game approach that's been successful for both of us is to build relationships with disability advocacy organizations. Now, you're in with numerous organizations as their tech consulting service. Now, these organizations just have consultants on hand who are willing to help you for a standard consulting fee. Now, this might lead to usability testing with their members, but really, there's a lot to learn, ahead of that, because they need to feel confident that you have the basics under control first. Now, I know that the CNIB, the Canadian National Institute for the Blind here in Canada, has a tech consulting wing, and I've heard of companies, working with the American Federation of the Blind also. And I think that this is a really great route to get started, because Jen and I talked a bit about sort of that, you just feel a little nervous, like entering in, this research that, you're going to do something wrong. And I mean, these consultants are used to that. They'll know that you're going to say some of the wrong things, and they'll help you along, and they'll help you get more knowledgeable. Now, groups that don't have a consulting wing might be willing to work with you. If you're doing, something that's of interest to you and they have the capacity, they might chat with you, but don't expect walk in and, start asking you to work with their members, because you have to earn the trust of the gatekeepers, and trust takes time. This isn't going to happen over, some lunch hour conversation. And frankly, it's a valuable process in itself to learn, to meet the people at the organization. Now, you should do some homework before approaching, any organization. So one is, knowing, if their members are using your products today, because obviously if their members are using their products, they're invested in, helping you connect. Also get familiar with the technology that the organization uses. And there's really no excuse for not doing this, because it's a matter of just reading their website and seeing what language they're using. Because really it's kind of a turn off if you start using terminology that they're sort of avoiding.
Yeah, so I've actually also had it where an organization requires me to go through an approval process. And if that's the case, just do it and respect the processes of the organization, and consider ethics every step of the way, particularly when you're engaging people with cognitive impairment. So I like to try to think like an academic researcher and make sure that I have good answers to any question related to information privacy, confidentiality, consent, and also commercialization of the product. It can help if you can partner in some way with a university or a research institution. So I've been fortunate to form a partnership with the University of Waterloo and the Murray Alzheimer Research and Education Program. And that actually goes a long way to help me with recruiting people for usability testing. Another avenue that, that you can take when you're looking for people to test with is to consider looking for organizations with a shared interest. So they actually might be willing to partner with you in some way. So for example, memory clinics are often private businesses that serve the same demographic that my organization does. And so initially I thought, reaching out to memory clinics would feel a little awkward maybe, like I was asking them for a huge favor. The thing is though that, there's often something that I can offer in exchange for help with finding usability testers, even if it's helping the clinic promote themselves as an innovative place with, with their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the tech space. So it might take a bit of time to coordinate a partnership arrangement, but it is well worth the effort.
So Jen and I keep on talking about all these long pole approaches to, finding people to test with. But I mean, what do you do in the medium term? I'd actually suggest talking to tech support, because people that phone tech support for your product have a stake in seeing that it gets better. Now, there are some caveats and things to consider with this approach. So first of all, the people that you meet through support may be frustrated. So you may have to rebuild a relationship first. I mean, I have a friend that said, phoning tech support when you have a screen reader feels like a kiss of death. So this person might have, passed through, multiple people. So be really conscious about that and sort of rebuild the relationship first. Also, be prepared to help. Because if they're a customer, they probably have a list of things that they want to talk about. One thing when I hold test sessions with people that are customers is I actually reserve just 15 minutes, at the end of a session to talk about whatever is on their mind, whether it's, the subject of my study or not. And I think that really goes a long way. Also, and finally, is your company has to have at least some capacity to address the issues raised. Because when you're talking to customers, there's more accountability to do something with that feedback that you've collected. I mean, if you're getting people that you may never meet again and may never interact with your company, well, then you can almost pretend that the study never happened. But if you're going to have that ongoing relationship, you need to be able to say what you did with the feedback, or how you prioritized it. Now, with all that considered, I still think that this is a fantastic strategy for finding testers, and it's kind of awesome because not only do you get that feedback, but you actually show your customers that you're serious about accessibility. Now, with that all said, we want to present the final and most powerful approach for finding people.
Yeah, and this is really what we call a snowball approach. And so, this idea of one person leading to many others. So people with dementia, for example, often are found doing the same types of activities. So they know other people, they attend, Minds in Motion activities and programs, they volunteer at the Alzheimer's Society, they attend dementia-related support groups.
Yeah, and I find I've learned that there's actually a boarding school here in Ontario where a lot of people who are blind and deafblind actually go during high school, and so people actually have friends that they went to school with, or people can have friends that they went to guide dog school with if they have a guide dog, and so things just snowball.
Right, and so you might start with a local connection who can connect you to others in his or her community, and in other locations. So pretty soon you're meeting with people thousands of kilometers or miles away. But in order for the snowball effect to work well, you really need people to feel positive or even delighted about the interactions that they have with you.
Which kind of makes the next thing we want to talk about a little tricky, which is screening. Because as you know, not everybody in the world is going to be the right person to do a usability test with. Because, I mean, first of all, not everyone you connect with is realistically going to use your product. And then a second one that it took me some time to learn is that not everybody knows their assistive technology really well. And so if you get somebody getting started, and doesn't even, typically use their technology to browse the web, you're going to learn more about, the usability of the technology itself and less about your product. And so it's going to be less helpful. And so what do you do to, screen out these people without damaging the relationship of the person who referred you? Well, actually, we found that you take a similar approach. So I tend to use a first usability test as a trial. So I'll see how the person does in that session, and do they give helpful feedback? Do they have a grasp of the technology that they're using? And I mean, if they don't, oh well, I just won't contact them again. But I try to leave them feeling positive so they don't start telling their friend bad things about us.
Yeah, so actually when I'm connected with a person with dementia, I often arrange a meet and greet. And so that happens with the person with dementia and their care partner, if the person with dementia would like to have a care partner there. And the meet and greet really gives me a chance to informally assess two things. One is how far along a person is in their dementia journey, and how familiar the person is with mobile technology. It also allows the person with dementia and the care partner to get to know me a little and to feel comfortable with me. And so once I've had a chance to talk with them a little bit, I can figure out, how I can best, what research methodologies might be best fit for that particular person. So I do try to adapt the research methodologies that I use to make the most of any time that people are willing to give to me.
Yeah, so let's talk a bit about research methods. So if you conducted UX research before, good news, yay! You likely, you can use the methods that you already use. I mean, most things that are done in user research is sort of readily adapted. I mean, you just have to kind of tweak it a bit. I found that it's possible to get information at every stage of the product development process. For example, I've seen ways to collect early design feedback, so that wireframing stage where you just have a picture on a piece of paper, and people are like, well, that's impossible. How am I ever going to do wireframes with people that are blind? Well, I've worked with a developer, and we've done the most basic code mockup, and we don't need the finished visual design to create that code mockup, because at that point it's more about, did you get the structure of the page well? Did you have intuitive links? Now, for later on in the process, a lot of times as designers will create prototypes in Vision, which is basically just a bunch of linked screenshots to test with hotspots to sort of test the flow of an application. And I've made that work with people who are blind also. Actually, it's a really ingenious idea of a former colleague of mine. We call it the human screen reader testing. And so the tester acts the person conducting the test asks as a screen reader, and the other person vocalizes the commands that they would give. And so it really gives a sense of, okay, is this flow working? Are we giving appropriate feedback? For instance, I'd say, well, I'd press H, and the human screener would say, they say what the first header is. And it requires a lot of expertise to do well, but it works. It's awesome.
Yeah, so, it's interesting what I've learned about what seems to work well and what doesn't work as well with people with dementia. For one thing, actually, paper prototyping is something that is a little bit problematic. People will, with dementia, depending on where they are in their journey, will look at
Well, looks like it happened again. We lost our presenters. Right, so the last time this happened, I was informed politely but firmly that I should have mentioned the hashtag for this event, which is hashtag ID24. So if you have any questions for any of the sessions, or you just want to spread the word or give some comments on it, you can use the ID24 hashtag. Also, if you want to get closed captioning for these sessions, there's a link in the YouTube description for each presentation that you can use. There you'll see live captions happening on the fly. And also, all of these videos will be available right after they finish as part of a playlist, which we'll also tweet out regularly, except maybe this one, if it's going to be too much of me talking, because I don't think that benefits anybody. But we'll see if our presenters can come back. If it's going to take too long, then I guess we're getting too close to the end to keep it going. What do you think, Leonie or Johnny?
Yeah, there's going to be a bit of a cutoff point, unfortunately, where we're going to run up against the next slot, obviously. But
right. You want to finish your story about how you got into accessibility, Leonie?
Sure. Completely by accident, actually. I'd been working on the web in the late 90s as a web designer, and lost my sight at the turn of the century. Took a couple of years out, and I started doing a computer course, which was called You, Your Computer and the Internet, which was an incredibly simple course for me to do in terms of its content, but it had the kind of benefit of letting me learn how to use my computer again with this screen reader thing I'd just been introduced to. And I remember seeing an email from a chap called Alistair Campbell, who's now Director of Technology at Nemensa, saying that he worked for this fledgling company, and they just built their first website, and they'd followed these web content accessibility guidelines version 1, and they'd really welcomed some feedback from screen reader users. And I thought, well, yeah, I used to do web stuff, and I'm a screen reader user now, so I sent him an email, which he swears he's still got, and I will probably kill him if he ever lets it out into the light of day. But it turned out this company was based just down the road from where I was living, and they were into accessibility and building websites and usability, and so I ended up working for them for many years, in fact, before I joined TPG 4 years ago, I think.
Yeah, I remember when you joined us, because obviously we had known you from the community for a long time and run into you at CSUN all the time, and then all of a sudden you have these people all of a sudden becoming your colleague. That's great.
Colleagues, yeah.
The same with Henny and lots of other people that have joined us.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the lovely things about the accessibility industry is that we've obviously got a lot of competing companies, both within one country and around the world, but we all manage to come together for events like this. Really good example. CSUN's another one. Accessibility Camp Toronto. There's heaps of them all around the world where people just set aside what would be normal kind of business competitive differences, because I think we've all just got this really strong commitment to improving stuff and making stuff better. And I think that really shows through when you just suddenly find you're working next to friends, you're collaborating with friends on a project. It's really, really genuinely the nicest thing, I think.
Yeah, I think it is interesting that companies that are supposed to be our competitors or that are our competitors, and you run into these people at conferences and things like that, and you just have a little chat, and you can compare opinions and results and advice and things like that, and it's not an unpleasant environment at all. It's very friendly.
And when we really get down to it, there's enough stuff out there that needs fixing to keep us all out of mischief for a long, long time.
True.
So much as I'm sure we would all rather be doing ourselves out of jobs and sitting on the beach drinking pina coladas, we're not going to run out of stuff to do anytime soon.
Well, we can do our work on the beach, sipping pina coladas now.
Oh, this is true, yeah. This is one of the advantages of working from home.
Maybe I need to next CSUN.
Yes. CSUN on the beach, that's what we need.
I think it's also that a lot of challenges that we're facing and issues that we're trying to resolve just haven't been fully resolved yet, so there isn't yet a perfect ideal solution. So we need to keep this dialogue open in the community to come up to some kind of consensus, or the closest that we can get to a consensus of what the right approach is. And for that you need to be talking to each other, and you can't just say, well, we're going to keep all of our opinions secret and we're not working together at all.
Absolutely. And no one person or even no particular group of people has all the answers. We need all the brains we can get to figuring out some of this stuff. You need different perspectives, different ideas, and different solutions to fix a lot of the things we need to try and fix.
Right.
There's a great question I often get asked, actually, which is, do you think accessibility is getting better? And it's a very hard question to answer, I think. I don't know what you guys think. That the problem for me is that I think if we were dealing with the web of 10 years ago, what do they call it, Web 2.0, the answer would probably be a pretty clear yes, it is.
Oh, you mean
the trick now is that
the good old days of Web 1.
Well, yeah, before stuff got really complicated. But that's the thing, is that now it is incredibly complicated. It's many layers. We deal with all kinds of different stacks of technology now. It's moving really fast. People are putting into production frameworks that haven't even reached a full whole number release yet. And so trying to sort of look back and work out whether something is more accessible now than it was a decade ago is actually really difficult, because the goalposts have moved so much. I think. Right. I don't know. Do you guys see it that way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess we could do a whole session about it. Maybe we should start our own podcast. And if Jennifer has joined us again, so Jennifer, if you want to unmute yourself, we have about 10 minutes left of time for your session. You're still on mute if you're talking.
Okay, there we go. Can you see us? I don't know what's going on.
Just remember to share your screen again, and then we can continue.
Okay. All right. So, start the screen share. All right. So we've just been talking about, we don't know how long we've been talking without actually having an audience, but we've been talking about some of the things to consider as part of planning a usability session, things like resisting the urge to control with assistive technology, keeping your setup simple, and being flexible about location. So we're just going to talk a little bit now about remote sessions and some thoughts on remote sessions.
So, we talk a lot about how flexibility is really important. And I've actually, ultimate flexibility is to allow people to, participate in your usability tests from home. And so I've actually had some success running remote usability sessions with people who are blind. And now the trick with all this is I find that I haven't found web conferencing software where I can reliably get the audio from a screen reader to play over it. Now, I've got over this audio sharing issue by having an invested third party on the other end help me run the session. And so this person is not necessarily a user researcher by trade, but I'll sort of give them some coaching ahead of time, and I just be a little flexible because they are going to make some mistakes because they're new to the practice, but they'll run the session and I'll observe remotely. But it's really helped with sort of getting people from far and wide to participate.
All right, so we've carefully considered our location and our setup and our protocol. Now what? Now we conduct the research. And so first things first, with any usability study, we like to start by making sure that people feel welcome. And this is especially true with people with disabilities. And we try to put people at ease by emphasizing that, you're not testing them, you're testing your software, your app, your website, whatever. Mm-hmm. People with dementia in particular have a rather negative association of the word testing. So when I meet with them, I really emphasize to them that I am there to learn from them and that they are the expert and I want to learn from their experience. And I also want participants to feel like we're in this research thing together. So whenever possible, I try to set up the physical space so that we're sitting side by side rather than across from one another, which immediately changes the tone of the session and makes it feel just like a little more casual and a little bit more conversational.
And so once you've warmed up, it's time to sort of sign those typical NDAs and forms. And we recommend that you send these in advance so people can actually read through them on their own time, because you don't want anybody to feel rushed when considering this type of thing. So you want to have friendly and accessible forms too, which means it's really time to make friends with your legal group, because you probably want to make a couple changes. So changes such as their technical accessibility. So I worked for a company that took a lot of pride in having a one-page NDA, but you can imagine this one-page NDA. It had like 8-point font and it was in multiple columns, and I doubt that it was accessible. And so you really want to think about the accessibility of the NDA, make sure that the text is legible, it actually has proper headers, and that the signing process is accessible in itself. So if there's an electronic signature, you got to test that out yourself, because you can't count on that being accessible. Another consideration is language.
Yeah, so just trying to be as a
All right. That's
that
it.
on you, Hans.
That's it. Technological center of, what was it, Canada of the world? No, I don't think so.
This is show business, people. This is how it happens. This is how, there's only one take.
In fairness, it wouldn't be ID24. The chances, it has to be said, of running 24 hours of talks online with people in different places all over the world and it all running without a hiccup are quite remarkable. So it's a real shame we've lost the guys, but
I blame Canada still.
Yeah,
that seems reasonable. Johnny, it's all your fault. Yeah. How are we doing on time?
I can close my laptop now.
We've got 5 minutes, so
we might just get them back.
I mean, I think at this
Can
point
we find them?
we can. Oh, there's
I'm not just
here.
going to sit back and let you blame Canada, Hans.
Thank you, Billy. I agree.
I'm just saying, you know, there were 2 Canadian streamers in there, and now there's 3. So it's got to mean something.
Good thing we're keeping the quota, you know, sort of balanced here. Thanks, Billy.
Yeah, I mean, I had to jump in here. I mean, this was ridiculous. I couldn't let that Australian get away with teasing you. I figure Dutch plus you know,
It's
New Zealand equals
really,
Australia.
but
You know,
I wouldn't expect a Canadian to know that the difference.
sorry, I live too close to the border. My U.S. geography gets thrown off.
You know, this conference is supposed to bring the world together, not start off territorial.
Well,
I only made fun of Buffalo because I figure Adrian will show up if we make fun of Buffalo. That's all.
Australia.
We'd only hope Adrian would show up.
Yeah.
Geez,
We
did you
also
say his
have
name
to,
3 times into a mirror? Because I see his Post-it note in front of the camera.
I heard my name 3 times.
Yeah, see?
There he is.
He's just a green square because Post-it notes for Adrian mean he's probably not wearing pants.
I think it's
No,
just because it's
it's
such
way
a
too late
square.
in the day to be doing that.
Jennifer's back and she's wondering what she just walked into. She's like,
He's not wearing pants.
I'll drop
Yeah,
out.
Okay, we got 10 minutes. We can do this.
Yeah, we can forego
my God.
questions, and I'll give you 10 minutes, Jennifer, if you want.
Sure. Yeah. We. I don't know why we're getting punted out, but
That's
anyway.
all right. I think
It's
anybody
okay.
who gets upset by something like this will have stopped watching by now. So it's only people who don't mind at this point. So go ahead and share a screen, and you have 10 minutes, and we'll just
All
go
right.
through the questions.
Okay. Sounds. Okay. I'm actually.
Hashtag ID24.
All right. So we just talked about leaving the laptop and actually just not creating that barrier between you and the participant.
All right. So yeah, one of the ways that I like not creating a barrier is by using my LiveScribe pen. It just allows for a really great bookmark recording of a session. And it's great because there's no wall between me and the participants. And I can go back and, get great quotes quickly. And I've used, this type of playback on more than one occasion to fight for features. Now, with all this talking about, sort of leaving all the sophisticated lab setup and recording behind, well, I mean, you still want people to sort of get that experience of hearing directly, from the people that you're testing with. So what do? Well, it's really tempting, I think, to bring in everybody into the room to listen in on your test. But I'd encourage you to, not sort of give in to that temptation, because you're just going to end up with a fishbowl effect where, your participant feels like everyone's watching their every move, and it's going to polarize the feedback that you're getting. So either, they'll feel like everybody wants to hear negative things and they'll start making it, more negative, or they'll be super positive to try to please everyone around.
Yeah, so I actually typically limit the number of observers to 1, a grand total of 1. And I make sure that the observer, when it's possible, just stays out of the sight line of the participant.
Ditto. Like, I've created schedules, so, everybody can join a session, and that's worked quite well.
Yeah, and I'm also really transparent with the dev team and senior leaders about interviews. So because of the unique nature of my work, I actually do have all the interviews and usability studies transcribed. And so the dev team has access to those, and they've just been scrubbed of any personal information. So that just protects the person as well. And so we'll talk a little bit about another thing that's really important, which is respecting the clock. The irony. So other people's time, is no less important than ours. And you might have a lot of things you want to test. And sometimes a session goes slower than you expect, and you might not get to everything. But you just got to let your list go and just take what you get and be grateful for that. So it might be tempting when working with older adults to assume that they have a lot of time, especially if they're no longer working.
Yep.
But that's not really a cool assumption to make. And also, a person with a cognitive impairment, a 1 hour session might be all they have to give you in terms of cognitive processing. So I'm aware that for some of the people that I work with, the time they spend with me might mean they're actually mentally exhausted for the rest of the day.
I say even be aware, don't even leave the door open for people spending extra time with you. So sometimes, it can be obvious to someone that you actually had 5 more questions. I try to obscure sort of the length and number of questions that you want to ask, because people sometimes just want to please you, and then they'll be like, oh, no, it's fine. And all of a sudden it turns into them spending 45 minutes. But that'll burn a relationship, and it just isn't right.
Yeah, so that said, it's not a bad idea to book a little extra time after each session, just in case your participant turns out to be a talker. Sometimes people are a little lonely and they maybe want to just chat with you for a little bit after the session ends. Sometimes you really are the highlight of somebody's day.
Now, that brings us to our next point, which is actually kind of relevant to this talk in general, is be flexible and roll with it. So as UX researchers, we've definitely experienced those moments where, the unexpected happens. So we get in a session when we realize that people don't have the background that we expected, or more often than not, technology breaks down in some, spectacular way. And we learn over time how to adjust our plans in our talks on the fly. So, I mean, this type of thing actually, I think, happens is a little more susceptible to happen when I'm doing sort of like the inclusive user research, because there's additional things that can go wrong. So you have, a layer of assistive technology on top of other technology to blow up. Sometimes, if someone's, meeting you in person, you might have, a service animal, that, something goes wrong with, or, sometimes there's health concerns. So you really have to be a very flexible person and be ready to sort of roll with whatever happens.
Yeah, and this is especially true when working with people with dementia, because people's experience with dementia can change from day to day. And so, I'm really careful about letting people know that, if it's just, even if I'm on their doorstep for a study and it's just not a good day, that's totally fine. They can just ask me to reschedule, and I'm happy to do that. Also, sometimes, just adapting what you're doing on the fly becomes really important. So, sometimes listening to a story or an experience from a person with dementia is just more important than getting to the task at hand, and just give them a little bit of leeway and then gently just guide the conversation back to where you want it to go.
When it's all said and done, it's really important to leave people feeling positive about the experience. And part of that is compensating people for their time. I mean, this isn't charity. Your product is getting better for this person helping you, and you need to compensate people for their time. Always. Think of people you speak to as a very difficult population to recruit, and you should be compensating people accordingly.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I am really aware that the people I work with meet with me because they are interested in either helping to make a difference for themselves or for the future generations of people who are diagnosed with dementia. And that does not mean that I get off the hook. I do still need to pay them. And, the reality is that the people that I work with, they are dying. And so it's no small thing that they are spending any portion of their time, with me. And I want them to know that they are really appreciated. And we found that, gift cards and a handwritten thank you note can really go a long way to people feeling valued and appreciated.
So just in closing, we found this work to be extremely rewarding. And, you know, an added bonus, we've got to meet some super awesome people. I mean, over time, you start getting excited of, oh, you know, how is this person going to receive this? Oh, I can't just wait till they see it. And we think that this is, while it was, you know, a lot to learn, we think it's doable. And we really want to encourage other people sort of in our field to try it out. And hopefully our tips today give you some confidence to get started.
You've got this. We'd love to hear your stories. If you'd like to get in touch with us, we'd love to be in touch.
All right, thank you very much.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. That was amazing. And yeah, you're right. Be flexible and be able to roll with it. Yeah.
We're skilled in the art of flexibility.
Yes, that's user research.
Raising pulses over here. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing your talk with us, though, and surviving just technical difficulties. That's never easy for anybody. So thank you very much.
Thanks for putting up with it.
No, that was awesome. Thank you very much.
So
okay, we'll be
10 minutes with the next presentation.
Yep.
And that is going to be Chris O'Brien. Yeah. So we'll see you in 10 minutes.
All right. Thanks very much.
See you then.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Okay. Bye.